Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat 5 segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show. What is up? Welcome back to Big Fat 5, a segment of Drummers on Drumming brought to you by Big Fat Snare Drum, where I talk to my favorite drummers about the stories and records that shaped their sound. I'm your host, Ben Hilzinger, and this week's guest is Sterling Laws. Sterling is a fellow Pacific Northwest native, currently living in Los Angeles, but more importantly, he's a Grammy-nominated drummer who has worked with Olivia Rodrigo, Kim Gordon, Chappell, Roan, NIKI, Matt Berninger, Natasha Bedingfield, The War on Drugs, Linda Perry, and many, many more. He's doing the thing and still finds his way to have a unique perspective behind the kit while working with so many artists, which is the ultimate goal and the reason I was so excited to talk to him. So please enjoy the 5 records that helped shape Sterling Laws into the drummer he is today. Cheers. What was the criteria for you to whittle it down to 5?
I think for me, the criteria was looking back on formative years of playing drums and specifically records that made me question my approach to playing drums rather than just thinking that's a cool song that I should learn how to play. And there's a ton of those, and I love those bands too, but these 5 are specifically more like, holy shit, I need to reevaluate everything that I do to like be as good as this person, or even just like understand what they're doing and why I liked it so much, why it resonated so much with me, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've been asking a lot of drummers this on the drum panel, but I'll ask you, what is the best compliment someone could give you as a drummer?
Oh, that's a hard question. I think the best compliment that I think you can get is almost not even about playing drums. Like I'd rather, if I play a show, I'd rather that somebody come away thinking that the band was really tight, which I know to interpret as all units, including myself on the drums, were acting as a cohesive thing.
That was exactly my answer the other week.
Yeah. I don't really want them to say like, you're sick, you know?
Totally.
I'd rather them say like, that is an amazing band.
Yep. Because that means future income.
Yeah, sure. It's not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. I guess. Yeah, exactly. So, well, you mean you're an incredible drummer. I see you around. You play around LA all the time. You play around the world all the time. And so I'm really excited for people to listen to you because you have been on, whether people realize it or not, they've heard your drums on the radio, and you're doing it. So I'm really excited to see how you became who the hell you are. And so let's just hop into the first one. And we did talk about, this was in at least chronological order for the most part. So the first album is Bad Motor Finger by Soundgarden. The release year is 1991. And you gave me a bunch of the songs, a few of them being Rusty Cage, Searching with My Good Eyes Closed, and Jesus Christ Pose. But you said you want to focus on Searching with My Good Eye Closed. And Matt Cameron is the drummer. So take it away, and then we'll listen to some of that song. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Bad Motor Finger, Soundgarden in general is sort of synonymous in my head with music as a whole. My parents, when I was younger, had this big long line of CDs in my basement. There was like hundreds of CDs, and I would just pick out a record to listen to based on the cover art, as one does. And if you haven't ever seen the cover for Bad Motorfinger, you should look it up because it looks just like the coolest thing. It's like this big saw blade sort of thing, that circular saw blade, and it just looks really badass. And I think I knew of Soundgarden before I even realized I knew them, having grown up in the Northwest. And I was born in Seattle, and my parents, were around in the 80s and 90s in that scene.
Because your mom's a drummer as well.
She was, yeah. My dad bought my mom a drum kit when they got married. So she took lessons a little bit, and then it was always just something that was set up in my basement. Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough to have this sort of like very normal, just split level home, but it did have a basement, which let me make some noise, and her as well. But yeah, discovering that record, I remember putting it on, and the first song is Rusty Cage, and it just like hits you over the head with a ton of bricks. I remember thinking that the drums were so loud in the mix. If you listen to that record, like Matt's drums are almost as loud as the vocal. And that band, when you get more into their discography, you know that they're full of guitar riffs. Like they're a very riff band. I think they were one of the first like cool kind of hard rock bands to have hit songs in odd time, like Day I Tried to Live, and Black Hole Sun has some weird stuff, and Spoon Man and whatever. Anyway, I remember the intro of Searching with My Good Eye Closed is really weird. It's like this sort of drone, and there's this guy like talking about farm animals, and then he ends by talking about the devil, and then it goes into the song. And it's just this sort of like mid-tempo riff. At first, it just sounded, it was just like the heaviest thing I'd ever heard. It was unbelievable. And then once I started trying to play along to it, which I couldn't, I realized that what Matt is playing isn't overly complicated, and it bounces. He's a very I mean this as a compliment, he's quite a bouncy drummer, I think. He like plays off the skins a lot. He plays really heavy, but it's different than like a Bonham thing. He's very musical, very poppy, and a lot of his phrasing and the way he accents things have to do with the vocal melody, which I remember being kind of drawn to. There's a lot of bands around that time where that's not the case as much. And I think Matt, his career shows that he has an incredible ability to find a drum part that complements a song in a way where it feels like he's propelling it forward, but it's also almost melodic. And I think that's why they chose to mix the drums so loud. At least I like to think that anyway. The cymbals are pretty bright. I imagine they're not super like big, dark, washy kind of things, which is of the time for sure. I think in 91 or 90 probably when they recorded it. And it's just so present. It feels so present, but it doesn't feel harsh. And I think if he wasn't such a talented drummer, that stuff can come off quite harsh and quite brash. But for him, it just feels like it's like a ton of bricks coming at you at 1,000,000 miles an hour, I love it.
Yeah, you need those bright cymbals back in the 90s to cut through those massive guitars.
Yeah, Kim on guitar, and I know Chris played guitar as well, and Ben on bass. They're covering so much ground. You really have to stick out and it's not even about who's like sticking out or who's on top. It's just finding your zone, finding what frequency you can complement that still stays out of the way of what Chris is doing on vocals, which is an instrument in itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well, here is a little bit of Searching with My Good Eye Closed.
It's crazy, like, when you listen to, if you kind of dissect, sometimes I hate dissecting things. I'd rather they just live the way they live. But if you listen
Well, don't start a podcast on dissecting drums then.
I know, God. If you listen to what he's doing, like, in the kick pattern, the riff that Kim and Ben are playing on the bass and the guitar is so rhythmic, and the melody, the vocal, is sometimes doing it and sometimes not. And the way that Matt chooses when to accent the kick and then like hit those like syncopated cymbal hits, like it just feels so cool. I learned later that they, most of the time when they would play a show, that was the first song that they would play. That was like their opener, which I think is like so badass. They would do like the whole intro and then go into the song. I got to see them one time at the Hollywood Bowl, and that's the first song they played, and I was elated. Actually, and funny enough, Matt Cameron wasn't playing that show as Matt Chamberlain because Matt Cameron was out on tour with Pearl Jam, which is still, I mean, seeing Matt Chamberlain do anything is still a treat, you know.
You had to settle for Matt Chamberlain, yeah.
Yeah, he definitely does it justice too. It sounded great.
Yeah, my claim to fame with them is I was able to, I mean, you're from Seattle area, so I used to work at Cactus on Alki Beach.
Yeah.
And I waited on Chris Cornell
shit.
one time with his daughter, and I'm assuming a business manager, and very nice guy. So tall. He's like, I'm 6'1", and he was towering over me, so.
Yeah, they're all pretty
large,
big dudes. I've had the fortune of meeting Matt once, which was crazy, and he's so kind, such a sweet dude, but also like very big, and I think Ben's a pretty big dude too. You just had to like be fucking big, you know, to just do the thing then, you know. They were eating different Frosted Flakes than we were.
Yeah, exactly.
You're pretty tall, but I'm not very tall.
You're tall enough, man. All right, so number 2, I think this is a perfect record from start to finish. So it's In Rainbows. Yeah. The artist is Radiohead. Release year's 2007. And key tracks, 15 Steps, Body Snatchers. You want to focus on Weird Fishes. And the drummer is Philip Selway. So take it away, and then we'll listen. Yeah.
My man. It's funny, Radiohead is one of my favorite bands. I don't even know if I could choose a favorite record, but this record in particular, it came out in 2007, which I was pretty young still. And I remember hearing it for the first time and just being so obsessed with how they made it. I just didn't understand the bends in OK Computer. I could kind of make sense of it more. It's like a rock record or there's some electronics, but In Rainbows was so polished, particularly with the drums and the loops. You know, I know they do a lot of splicing and things, or whatever Nigel was doing with the productions. It just kind of baffled me. The parts aren't overly complicated. Phil is not an overly complicated drummer, which is why I love him so much.
Yep.
A lot of my favorite drummers are they were in bands, like they're band drummers. Bands are my favorite, form of music in general. And so like he is not, the most technically able or anything. It's just like what he plays is exactly what needs to be played. Weird Fishes in particular is cool. Obviously it starts with the drum thing. I love how he's so restrained and then it finally opens up to the ride cymbal when the song kind of blossoms. And it's just the same groove, but that one move is everything. Like it's perfect. And the tones they're really simple drum sounds. They're kind of thin. It's the snare has like a bit of a ping to it. They're not traditional, like, yeah, this is a sick, very different than somebody like Matt Cameron, but it feels perfect. And Johnny and Tom have gone on to do The Smile and these other bands and Tom Skinner on drums in The Smile is an incredible, incredible drummer. Mm-hmm. But if he played in Radiohead, it wouldn't sound like Radiohead. Nobody can play the way Phil plays. I've seen them live a number of times and it scratches every itch every time. It's really him. And obviously you have people like Tom York and, Nigel producing the records, and he's one of a kind as well, obviously. But yeah, there's magic coming from Phil's hands from the source for sure.
Yep. All right, here's Weird Fishes. just don't understand people that don't get Radiohead.
Yeah, it's a different kind of person, you know. We don't judge them too hard, but
I'm judging him, but anyways, all right. So we talked about before hopping on about this band, because if people don't know, I'm also from the Northwest, similar to you, and so this band I heard a lot about. Anyways, enough teasing. The album is Future Self. The artist is The Globes. The release year is 2011, and a few of the key tracks: Pigeon, Stay Awake, but you wanted to talk about A Stitch Couldn't Save the World. And Marcus Orada is the drummer. So yeah, take it away.
I'm 31, and I feel like I sort of witnessed the tail end of a specific kind of music scene happening in Seattle, and more specifically, like the town I grew up in, this town, Anacortes. There was an all-ages venue there, and there were a couple bands. I was in a band, and then there were a few bands that were with kids that were maybe 5, 6, 7 years older than me. And they would play gigs in Anacortes. There was like a sort of fun, it was called Bumper Palooza. It was like a music festival in Washington Park. And the Globes played it once, but they would play at the Department of Safety, the venue in town that we had. And those memories, watching somebody like Marcus play drums, was extremely influential. Like, he played drums like nobody that I had seen in person until that time. And I can now look at other drummers like Chris Bear from Grizzly Bear, like those guys who have a similar style. I would say the Globes sound, they're in sort of that lineage of Grizzly Bear vibe, but not having that sort of Rolodex of music at the time. His approach to creating grooves and dynamic shifts, in hindsight, I think a lot of it was from kind of a jazz background, but he was playing in this guitar heavy, you know, like early aughts indie rock band. And they were so much better than everybody else. Like, all the bands that I was in and the bands around us all looked up to the Globes. And sadly, they never really had their moment in the sun, I think. I know that they all went on to do different things. Eric, the singer, is still involved in music in the Northwest. I'm not sure what Marcus is doing now, but they came out with this one record on Barzik, and I had heard these songs being played for years before the record came out at their shows, and they came out with an EP that was really good, and then they seemingly put out the record and kind of disbanded. But they were they were like everybody's favorite band of that time, and really, really, really talented drummer.
Yeah, Marcus is insane. I really hadn't heard these songs in a long time, and he blew my mind. So
it holds up, dude. Like, the record holds up. You know, it's 14 years old or whatever now. The songs are older than that, because I remember hearing them, it must have been 2010, 2009, 11, that they were playing some of these at shows. And they were always just like, they were so cool, like so serious. They were kind of what I imagined, like, if you were in Brooklyn when the Strokes were happening, like, the Globes were like the cool guys, you know, at least in my head. We were all like geeky Weezer kids, and they were like really cool, you know?
Yeah. All right, well, here is A Stitch Couldn't Save the World.
Such a cool groove. I Googled his name before this just because I was curious, and all that came up really was stuff from a decade ago about the Globes. So I don't know. If you're out there, Marcus, come say hello.
Yeah, Marcus. Come on, pop on the Zoom call,
man.
dude.
Hope you're well. No, it's so good. That's one of my favorite like air drumming records for sure. I've listened to that album probably as much as any record in my life. I was joking. I was reminded of this as we were listening. My friends and I just kind of bullshit about stuff all the time. And we were talking the other day about how there's no more riffs anymore. Like that song starts with a riff and then it goes into the verse. Like people don't have, the riff is like dead. Same with Weird Fishes too. Mm-hmm. There's a riff and then the verse starts, and nobody does that anymore. It's like an intro, like a little melody intro, and then it goes right into a verse. People are just bored
broken
of
chorus
riffs.
And then goes into the first verse. Yeah, interesting.
And Soundgarden too. I mean, they're the king of riffs, you know. Bring back. Well, the
guitars
riff.
are slowly coming back, and so maybe the riffs will. That's the next step.
I hope so, man.
Yeah, my God,
I love a riff.
Well, I mean, speaking of some cool riffs, so the next one is the Boxer. The artist is The National. This album came out the same year as In Rainbow, so 2007. And a few of the songs, Mistaken for Strangers, Brainy, and Apartment Story. Love all those songs, but you said you wanted to focus on Mistaken for Strangers. And then another drummer that I try and channel in the studio, Brian Devendorf. So, yeah, take it away.
Brian is incredible. I think I was a couple years late to learning about this record. I remember specifically when somebody turned me on to it. It must have been 2 or 3 years after it came out, which means that they were already kind of having their moment. I think that record is the one that sort of catapulted the band into the spotlight, as it were.
Yeah.
His drums are not too far away, in my mind, to Phil, in the sense of like he's a band drummer. He's creating these parts. I've always loved how the National songs, you know, their productions are so soaring. Matt's vocal is so emotional. Some of the stuff he does is rhythmic, but a lot of it is, you know, very sultry and beautiful and smooth. And yet Brian's doing these extremely angular, like a ton of like 16 notes, like both his hands are moving a lot of the time.
Almost like new wave. Like,
yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, new wave drumming, yeah.
Would polyrhythm, I don't even know what the fuck a polyrhythm is. Would that be what that means?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just like there's some air in there.
Yeah,
there's some Devo, like early Devo, kind of like machine-like drumming in there that are,
someone at home is rolling their eyes like, it's called to this, and you guys don't know.
Exactly.
No, his drumming is so very calculated, and when you see them live, he's obviously very calculated. Like he doesn't deviate. A lot of the fills he plays are exactly like the record. I mean, they're his parts, you know, he came up with them. It's just so, on paper, I feel like the National shouldn't work. Like the mix of what they're doing melodically, musically with the percussion and the rhythms, it doesn't make any sense. And then when you hear it all together, it's this incredibly emotional, just like wave of sound. Super, super powerful, really cool. And this song in particular, I know is one of their bigger songs, but it's unbelievable.
You have to do it running, but you'll do everything that they ask you to, 'cause you don't mind seeing yourself in a picture as long as you look far away, as long as you look removed. Showered and blue blazing, fill yourself with quarters. Showered and blue blazing, fill yourself with quarters. You get mistaken for strangers by your own friends when you're passing the night under the silvery city bank lights. Coming on and eyes glazing London. Oh, you wouldn't want an angel watching over. Surprise, they wouldn't want to watch another innocent elegant fall into the unmagnificent lives of the dogs.
He plays pretty soft.
Yeah,
He's
and
not
everything's
really
very
hard.
close, you know. I have to say, the National, you know, is such one of my favorite bands, and one of the sort of weird full circle moments in my career is I've had the good fortune of doing sessions with Matt Berninger, the singer, and it was really interesting to me. I don't think I've ever told him this, but if he's listening, he won't listen, but if he is listening, then great. Getting to witness how he makes a song and records a song, it's like a fucking drummer's paradise, because he's so rhythmic and emotive in when before he even has a lyric, he's spitting out rhythmic ideas for what he wants it to feel like. So I can only imagine in his band in the National, like that has influenced Brian and his creativity. I guess what I'm saying is it's great to see somebody like Matt do his thing and then sort of go back and see, just imagine what that's like, 20 years ago when they made that record, how it felt. And, they were 20 years younger, but they still, I'm sure, had a similar energy. And Matt, I'm sure, was still similarly, processing his creative songwriting.
The stuff with Matt, it's his solo stuff, or what are those projects?
Put out a record a few years ago that was a solo album, and so I kind of caught I didn't record on that. I caught the tail end of doing some live stuff with him, and then since that, over the past couple of years, we've been recording a ton that I think is slated to come out sometime soon, which is exciting.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's been great. My wife is involved in that project too, which is really fun. So we get to record together with Matt and some other friends. I couldn't say enough good things about that experience. It's great. It's really fun.
All right, so number 5, the album is Live from the Ryman and More. The artist is Sheryl Crow, and the release year is 2019. Key tracks: Change Would Do You Good, Everything Is Broken, Maybe Angels, and then you want to talk about If It Makes You Happy. And Fred Eltringham. So take it away.
Oh, man. I have never met Fred in person, although we're sort of pen pals on the internet. Or at least I like to think we are. He's probably like, stop talking to me. I'm a huge fan of Fred. For people unfamiliar, he is one of Nashville's, most prominent session players, drummers. He's been playing with Sheryl for a long time. I want to say like at least 10 years, maybe more, in her live band and on her records too. He's played on all sorts of stuff. Like, just look up his credits sometime if you're not familiar. But Fred is one of my favorite like live and session drummers. He does everything that I admire and nothing that I don't. He is so tasteful. He's powerful. He looks cool all the time behind the kit. He's just like,
it's important.
I don't know. I can't sing his praises enough. And this record, obviously it's not that old. So it's not like I was listening to it when I was a kid, although I was listening to Sheryl Crow when I was a kid before I even really thought I liked Sheryl Crow, to be honest. And the older I get, the more I have an appreciation for her catalog and just her she's also an unbelievable musician and songwriter.
And she was a backup singer for Michael Jackson, right?
Yeah.
In the very beginning. Yeah. She's had a long career.
I think she was a public school teacher and then started writing jingles and then did that and then kind of did her own thing. And she's just had the most respectable career you could possibly have.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Seems like an all-around great person. But anyway, Fred, this record they did live at the Ryman, they play all her hits. The band is insane. I feel like if any of my friends are listening to this, they'll be laughing because I talk about this record a lot. And I've told everybody I know to listen to it. It's such a, not to be cliche, but like a masterclass in how to play the drums. The fills, the feel, the dynamics, all of what Fred is doing is so powerful. And every single song is a new lesson. I listened to this record. I've listened to it 100 times and I can't get enough of it. I think it's great. The band, everybody else in the band is really good too. Not if you're just a drummer, but yeah, Fred's unbelievable. It's really, really good.
All right. Well, here's If It Makes You Happy. Is that him counting off? Is that Fred counting up? Nice.
Yeah, he's always yelling. I feel like as the years go, that's just I mean, I would encourage anybody to listen to the whole album. Obviously, everybody knows that song. Yeah, Cheryl's vocal, I feel like every year as she gets older, it gets better. It's so insane. And I think Fred's drumming, there's so many examples in his recording catalog and his live catalog that just show that he really is a student and a fan of songs and of the way songs work. And I think that record, Live at the Ryman, is such a showcase as to what he does best. You can hear, if you listen through the record, like the push and pull of tempos and different sections and feel and the way he will create energy without changing a thing, you know? It's just like, it's really wild.
Yeah, I've never heard of them before. And it's embarrassing when I have a drummer that is seemingly so prolific and I don't know who they are.
There's so many good drummers, you know? What are you going to do?
Yeah. Host a podcast. That's what I do. So,
yeah, now you know.
Well, that is your Big Fat Five. Yeah, talk about what you've been up to these days. Because, I mean, gosh, you were at the Grammys this year because your drumming was nominated. You've been out touring the world with NIKI. What's the next year looking like for you?
Yeah, I stay busy in town, try to do as much, you know, session recording stuff as I can. This past year, we were nominated for stuff that I recorded on for Olivia Rodrigo, which is really great and humbling and exciting. So that was fun. Yeah, earlier this year, I made the decision to part ways with this band Low Moon that I had been in for a long time. I love them all dearly, and they're continuing on. If they're coming to a city near you, you should go see them. Incredible band, all very close friends of mine. And it was just time for me to try new things. And, you know, we had been a band for a little under a decade and put out a few records and toured a lot. And I was just feeling like I wanted to see what other chapters of my life held for me.
That's awesome, man.
So yeah, later this year, like you said, I was just on the road. We're kind of in the middle of a world tour with this artist, NIKI, who's an incredible singer. She's from Jakarta. She lives in the States now, which is fun. You know, it's a rock show. It's 2 guitars and bass and drums and keys, and half the songs have no click, no tracks, which is fun, you know, to stretch out. And
awesome. Yeah.
I couldn't say enough kind things about her. She's great. Specifically, the crew, too, is great. My friend Skitch is one of our techs. He does my drums and stuff. He's great. Shout out to Skitch.
Awesome.
I actually met Skitch through Neil Daniels. He was teching for Neil.
Oh, yes. I've also had correspondence with Skitch. Yeah.
He's the man. Great, incredible drummer himself, too.
I kind of want my tech to be better than me. I think that'd be best case.
I have no doubt that if I broke my arm, Skitch could upstage me at a show, for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Big Fat Five.
And that's the show. If you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, so it'll get bigger and better, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'll be an OG listener that can brag to all your friends. Anyways, why don't you go and check us out at bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on all the socials. Just search for Big Fat Snare Drum and you will find us. The show is edited in part using iZotope RX Audio Editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at iZotope.com. And thanks again to Gunnar Olsen for the theme music. Bye.